you're all doing really well. Thank you so much for joining me if you've headed over to part 2 of this video. I had so many questions from you guys on my last video and on Instagram, and there was just so many to fit in. So I thought I'd do a part 2 to this video so it's easier for you guys to navigate through all the questions, and hopefully I have done them justice and given you as much advice as I can. I love that so many of you guys have reached out to me and are studying law at the moment or thinking about going into corporate law, and I'd love to give you my insight and hopefully it helps you guys. So I thought I'd just go straight into it. The first question was, how am I so organised? I think this is perhaps because, as so many of you guys know, I work full-time as a lawyer, but then I also have a few side hustles, including teaching Pilates, also creating content for you guys on YouTube. So I definitely think that it's not something that I have always been great at, but I think it's just something that I learned over the years that I needed to get really organised, especially when I was at university and studying so many different subjects and just had so many different things to prioritize. And I think it's just one of those things that I think it's just a really good thing to have in terms of your skill set as well, because it will really make life easier for you, especially as a lawyer. So I think it's really important to always have like a list of things to do, but then always look at that list and try and prioritize everything. And that's how you get organized, because by writing it down you kind of know what you need to do, and you're also thinking about the steps that you're going to take to actually get there. So I think being organized is definitely such a great skill set for any job, and it's just one of those things that will actually make your life so much easier, because it's just about managing time, managing expectations, and also making sure that you're meeting deadlines. And something that I've learned over the years, especially in my career, I absolutely hate not meeting deadlines. So I think it's just something that's been drilled into me that, you know, I don't want to miss deadlines for the client. So it's just something that I need to get on top of. So I always start by just writing, I always start by having a to-do list and then just going through it and just making sure that everything that is in the list is something that's achievable. And if it's not, then I always approach the client and make sure that I have at least voiced my expectations and, that I maybe cannot reach that deadline. So I think as long as you have open communication and you can kind of get comfortable with deadlines and make sure that you're on top of things, you will be able to kind of you'll definitely be able to stay on top of everything. Also had a couple of questions as well, all to do with like work-life balance and how you manage life after work. So I have actually worked in private practice and then also in-house, so I can basically vouch for both the scopes. And I think it's one of those things where when you have to work till late, you kind of have to work till late. So there's been times where I've been working till 4 in the morning or even later if there's a deadline. I used to work in litigation, so there was a lot of court deadlines and a lot of court work that had to go into it before a trial. And when I was working in private practice, there were loads of times where I had to stay till late because there was a deadline. And we had to just prepare court bundles before trial the next day or the next couple of days, and it was just something that always happened at the last minute, so you couldn't really plan in advance or really prepare yourself. You had to kind of wait till that last moment till statements were in, and then you were able to kind of like organize and make duplicate bundles and things like that. Definitely think it's something to look into if you are going into different seats as a lawyer. You have to look at the work-life balance. I definitely think it's such a great question, because when you're studying law and also when you're practicing it, sometimes you won't get that in-depth knowledge of, does this person have a social life? Is it hard to have a work-life balance? How long will I have to work per day? And it's just something that is really good to have in mind. I definitely was able to get a lot of experience early on, and I would definitely recommend that. And I think you kind of gauge whatever firm that you're working with, how the work-life balance is and what the culture is like at that firm. Every firm is completely different, and it just depends on what type of law that you're practicing. For instance, if you're in a transactional seat, then you might have more deadlines when there's a sale of an aircraft or a property, for instance, or in my case, where you have a trial coming up and there's just loads of things that will go into it really last minute. So it's just something that you should keep in mind. I work in-house at the moment, and I definitely have work-life balance in comparison to somebody who's working private practice, and I would definitely say that I am able to manage my time really well and really get the most of everything that I want to do in my career and then also in my social life. Definitely say that working in-house has its perks of work-life balance in comparison to working in private practice. We don't have targets like when you're working in private practice where you have to have chargeable hours per day. It's just a little bit more flexible working in-house because you can actually take your time rather than being on the clock and really under a pressured environment. Another question that I got was, what is it like being in court? In my private practice job, I was so fortunate to actually experience going to court and having to go to trials, and it was just such a great experience for a young lawyer. You learn so much when you go to court, but in fact my very first experience that I did when I was in secondary school was being a court usher, and it was just so insightful. So I was sitting in family court hearings, criminal court hearings and commercial court hearings, and they were just so insightful. I learned so much from watching the judge and the barristers, and it was just really insightful and a great way to just see how the lawyers apply. If you ever get an opportunity of going to a courthouse, I would definitely recommend it because it's really insightful and it also gives you such a different perspective on law as well. Most courts allow you to sit in the gallery and see what hearings are on the day. I know that some universities also encourage it, so I definitely recommend going and visiting a court and just seeing if you can get some experience that way. Somebody also said, can you recommend what I should do to get a stable future? My personal view is, being a solicitor as opposed to a barrister, you do get more of a stable career, I would say. Being a barrister, you are self-employed and you are also a business in the fact that you are having to go out there and get more work for yourself. Whereas being a solicitor, you will normally be employed rather than self-employed, and you'll normally work full-time rather than part-time. So I definitely think that being a solicitor as opposed to a barrister is a bit more stable, and it gives you that financial stability if that's what you're looking for. Another question that I got was, did I get a BA LLB or a BBA LLB? I got a bachelor's degree in law and my initials after are BA LLB. Hope that answers your question. I also got loads and loads of questions about corporate law and how to become a corporate lawyer and guidance about the field and what it's like. So when I was at university, I applied for an internship and I actually was successful, and I got into an internship at Clifford Chance. So I think that definitely opened doors for me into the corporate world of law, and it was just so insightful and one of the best experiences I've ever done. And it is definitely something that just showed me the different world to law, because before that I had only really had experience at high street firms. So this really did open my eyes to, you know, what it would be like to be a lawyer in a corporate environment. It was definitely something that I wanted to go into because I had experience in business, and I definitely thought that I could give a lot more if I combine the two. I actually had a lot of experience in running a business, and it was just one of those things that I thought that if you put both together, I would definitely be able to add value to the client, because I had business acumen and I was able to see certain things that the client may want in terms of advice, and it was just something that I thought that I would be able to be good at. If you're looking into getting into this industry, I would definitely say try and get as much experience and a foot in the door as much as possible. Sometimes it's actually about who you know and not how much you know. It's just by reaching out and trying to think outside the box and think about the people around you and then their connections, and just seeing who knows who and who can actually just get you a week's experience in a firm or just a foot in the door basically. The traditional way of going into law sometimes doesn't work. You can be applying for years and years and years and you might not even get a training contract or a vacation scheme. It's just something where you might actually not be able to get that experience. But I would definitely recommend trying to get as much free work experience as you can, because at the end of the day it's adding value to your own career, and sometimes that's worth more than the wage. And it was something that I did for several years. I would go and do loads and loads of free work experience, even though I had loads and loads of commitments and financial outgoings, but I would just look at the reward to my own career, just think of the bigger picture and how much that would actually pay off. I was also asked to describe the difference between working in-house and working in private practice. So I had only worked in private practice, and it was only through a secondment that I was able to actually experience what it was like working in-house. And what we mean by in-house is working directly for the client rather than for a law firm where you work for several different clients. And it is completely different. I think it all depends as well on what client you work for in-house, and in the same sense it is who you work for in terms of private practice. So you can work for a magic circle firm, a silver circle firm, or a high street firm, and it will be completely different. I think in terms of the main differences, it doesn't change in terms of who you're advising. So in terms of private practice, you're advising several clients, whereas in-house you're just advising that one client. And in terms of chargeable hours, in private practice you have a target of a set amount of chargeable hours that you need to do per day, per year, etc. Whereas when you're working in-house, it doesn't really work like that. You just get a stream of work and it's not billed to the client in a certain way. So it's just you're there to deliver advices on everything basically. I think in terms of your advice as well, in private practice you do tend to hone in on a specific area. So for instance, if you were advising on property, you wouldn't then advise on something completely different like going to court or litigation, etc, etc. So I think in terms of your career, you are getting into that specialist law, whereas when you work in-house, depending on what your role actually is, you can have so much broader scope in terms of advising on contract law, advising the board. You could get involved in employment issues or contract law issues or court proceedings. So your role might be so much more broader, and you might have knowledge in so many different areas that will help the business. So it's a lot more challenging, whereas it's not really specialist. So I think I'm going to end the Q&A here, guys, because I have covered quite a lot. I really do hope that this has helped you guys. Let me know if you've got any more questions or if you'd like to see a specific video. Really enjoyed this and I hope you guys have too. Do remember to subscribe so that you don't miss out on any new uploads, and I shall see you on my next one. Thank you so much for watching.